in the congregation. There's 8 times that I know of. So I go in the morning, meet a committee tomorrow night that is the Christian people who are concerned about the churches addressing these matters. And the churches in Los Alamos and Santa Fe are addressing it with pantheism, are addressing it with New Age. So it's not merely the New Age influence at Los Alamos, which is the case, but that's the position. That's the position of most preachers. Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. If I'm alive at all, I'll be back Sunday night at 10 o'clock. If I'm dead, I won't be back. I'll be back, but I will not be back. And so Tim is, have you heard any word from Tim?
He's leaving 9 to 6.
Oh, I thought he was already, I thought it was tonight, but he put that off, so he asked him to have him up there at 6 o'clock tonight. And your families, let me see how you do. Important, but some things are just more important. People are going to new works, and some are just finishing thesis, some are just beginning work. And Carney survived. You know, when he came across the border, they wonder, you know, how much he was delivering down there. If you don't know Steve Greiner, Steve looked like he's delivering a ton of marijuana down where they have pure heroin. And so he could talk him out of it. He has sold 7 tons of ice cubes to the Eskimos. So I'm sure he could do it. I just hate to have him waste his time doing it. 3 things we'll do tonight. Again, this is the bibliography that I had asked for. I want to show you a useful book. Well, the first book that I read in the history, I have the technical medical books on anatomy, physiology, etc., but this is valuable. This is a standard book in the history of science. Charles Singer, Short History of Anatomy and Physiology. I told you I'd bring, I won't discuss the history of medicine in this class, but this is a very important work. And this area, in the 2nd and 3rd century, the only area that was advancing was in physiology and anatomy. And that's pure description. And it was a church. The chart I gave you didn't show how many times the church has taken a stand against the scientific enterprise. See, up to the 18th and 19th century, the church has historically taken a stand against every development in the sciences, in the name of something I'll try to lay out today about your position paper. What are you going to tell the church? What are you going to tell kids? What are you going to tell? I was in a church Sunday where the preacher, one of the preachers, one of his daughters, their daughters, is the first young lady. She's a freshman, moved in the middle of the year from freshman mathematics to calculus in the history of the Jacksonville High School. They said there'd been nothing like this little 15-year-old girl. And I said, I want that child for this school. We've got to have the very best. No one had ever moved from algebra and trigonometry in freshman, middle of the year anytime. And she's very talented. She won a first over Champaign singing. Her group singing won 2nd place. So we have to have thousands, hundreds or thousands of these in the church. I can't believe not. I don't believe not. I'm in too many. We have to have, see, they won't be paid. If that's it, only a vision can cause people to do those things. Just like it caused Ray, see, to jerk a family up by the roots and come here. But see, he has a purpose. That's the only reason for doing it. You're either crazy or we're crazy, or there's a reason for it. And the reason has to be large enough to account for it. And, well, this is old now, but I just brought you old books in case someone stole them while I was out of the room. These are the first books in the history of medicine up to the recent medicine, history books in the history of medicine. Now that really needs to be in the history of psychology and the social sciences to see the medical model for another particular matter. See, sin has been reduced to 2 models from the 19th and 20th century. And one was a medical model that there isn't sin, there's only sickness, and a legal model, there's no sin, there's only crime. And these are the models that have displaced, makes problematic preaching about sin in the churches. People do not set gentle to that. They want to be encouraged. They do not want to be told they're sinners in need of anything. And their self-image, is jeopardized by being told that their existence is hopeless outside of Jesus. So we have to be careful how we say the things, but also the gospel is at stake. And if the gospel is false, and science and the sciences have falsified the gospel, it's absolutely ludicrous for her to be here. I just got a list of the Illinois colleges, if you have to have economic motivation like a good Marxist. I'm going to put just X and Y. Lincoln Christian College and Lincoln Christian Seminary are the lowest. This is the lowest paying school in the state of Illinois, and McMurray College is the next lowest down in Jacksonville. Those are the two lowest of the 363 colleges in the state of Illinois. And you know who has that information? The education office. Well, there has to be a reason. You either have to be brain dead, can't get work, or there's some reason for it. Okay. So you know, students would know really what the real cause of that is. But perhaps. I want to take just 2 or 3 minutes here and who told her to bother us? Now, Rick, he's left in North America. No one ever talked to him, and he gets 3 phone calls. Just quickly, these are just notations that historically I've typed them out and given to people, but I can't do that. Ground. I'll put it up here. We didn't say anything about the physics of light, but these are just result notations. Light is a wave, different wavelength corresponds to different colors. Now, it'll be very important for projecting astronomy, all kinds of things. Light is emanated and absorbed in bundles called photons. This material would be in high school or preschool probably. Work. More energy than a photon has, the shorter the wavelength. Now, you say, who cares about that? Well, projection for some things. See, about the nature of the universe. See, beyond the scope of mere observation. And electron and atoms exist only in certain allowed orbits, and the energy level photons are emitted. And when the electron falls from a higher orbit to a lower one, it absorbs, and the reverse takes place. This explains both the presence and the discrete spectra or color formation. See, all of this is about the nature of reality and about this that's called in question today in microscopic physics and used by New Age, that the fundamental principle of reality is chaos, not order. See? So these are quite simple movements, but to connect them in the history of science is less than simple. See, after it's done, almost anything is simple after someone's done it. So move through this. Molecules as well as atoms produce spectra. Ionized atoms have slightly different spectra or color. And normal atoms, a fact that allows for astronomers to estimate the temperature of distant objects. This would be very important for age of the sun, age of the moon, the age of your grandmother, seeing all these things. And when an atom is placed in a magnetic field, that's another concept. See, those are just things that have to be traced, and we don't have time to trace them. See, you couldn't trace the concept of light, let alone all the things, see, in a little elementary 3-hour class. But when this is so-called the Zeeman effect, and if you know science, you would know what that is. If you don't know it, it doesn't make any difference. See? We have giants of the faith in here that know, but they'll have to spell that out. Now, it allows astronomers to estimate the magnetic field in distant sources. Now, it'd have to be about the age, nature, chemical composition, the age of it. So we're going to start tonight laying a foundation in a more limited perimeter of science, see, in geology. So here are these things. Now, the principle of spectroscopy applies to all forms of radiation. Now, here's what we're going to get up against. See, universal laws, but by the time we get into the 20th century, something's collapsing on those. Discovery of helium, for just a little time. There's no point here just going through the history of the development of the nature of helium. Helium didn't seem to fit. And for over half a century, it looked like they'd broken the back of the universality of explanation, scientific method, just over the discovery of helium. See, And you couldn't discover helium because when it was discovered, it was over the observation of yellow lines, which is over sodium. And these are major names. If you want to find out, he became the editor even to this day. This is a major, I can't say it's a popular book, you know, that every Tom, Dick, and Harry reads, but a non-technical book is still in existence that he started. It's a major book that all of us, I read it, and if you're interested, just to find out what the big minds are doing, to tell us without specialized information in that. But I do believe we can understand the consequences without necessarily assuming we understand all the details of that material. Now this is a major name. Here's dates, just a few dates once in a while. He measured the temperature in the sunspots. Well, what does that have to do with the worldview or certain things? He was elected to the Royal Society for that reason. Now light from sodium is passed through a spectroscope and a yellow color. Now all that, if that's meaningful to you, we'd fill that in if you want material to read. But these are just results of development in the history of science along the principles of universality, the explanatory power of science, the one thing. Now, 19th and early 19th century responses to the paradigm and ideology. Now, you tell Big John, John's going to get well, or is he?
Yeah, he'll get better.
He'll be well about 9 tonight?
We'll have to lay hands on him.
No, I'll lay hands on him. Now, he has no business getting sick. I've told him about that before. Now, here's the response. Now, notice, the response was over paradigms. Some scientists said, well, there can't be helium because they didn't find any helium on the Earth. And it was Newton's ordering that the laws of physics obtain for the universe and for the Earth. Well, it looks like this is a violation. It won't be, but we're not playing little kiddie games. He's surprised, you know, like at school. So, here, spectral lines emitted by normal atoms in unusual environment. Now notice they were trying to explain it. Explain what they saw with a paradigm. That's oversimplification, but that's what it is. And some said, well, the heat and pressure in the sun, they had not measured that. See, these developments makes measurement possible. See, now that can be done with ease. See, in a freshman class on heat or magnetism, but just every Tom, Dick, and Harry wasn't doing that in the 18th and 19th century. So after a lot of people do things, it's easier for other people to do them. But discovering new things is a mark. Now watch this whole development here. In this development over helium, the development in 19th century was over this development here, frontiers in high precision, because this whole development is the end of empiricism, both technically and at the common sense level. That is the end of empiricism. And we're at two perimeters here, two frontiers in the 19th century. Frontiers at the edge of the visible universe. Well, why would they say the edge of the visible universe? Empiricism said if you can't see it, it's not there. Well, you can't even talk that way. See, the edge, if that's all there is, that's all there is. See? Now, helium problem not solved by brilliant theoretical insight. Now, helium was solved by incremental. I want to put that down. Incremental development. Incremental development. Over against paradigm. We're talking about paradigm. 19th century chemistry textbooks are the four that I've looked at, and I'm assuming these are the standard books. Now, these were widely used books. Understand there weren't standard textbooks like now that passed before the scientific affiliation, see if they're all right with everybody. 19th century chemistry stated the atmosphere of the Earth is 21% oxygen, 79% nitrogen. They had discovered what these are. Now, how was that derived? Method, see? Now, they removed the carbon dioxide and water vapor, and then, see, remove oxygen from what's left. Now, notice how simple, a little child would know better than that now. But this is a state of science. See, not a century and a half ago, all the great minds were at this level worrying about this, and you probably don't worry about it at all. Now, when 10%, or see, when the percent of oxygen was determined, and what was subtracted from 100%, it was given the percentage of nitrogen. Well, that whole methodological procedure is correct if and only if the compound of oxygen and nitrogen is the total makeup of air. That, as a matter of fact, isn't the truth. But you see, they deduced many things in the name of science that didn't follow at all. but it looked like it followed given the assumption. See, that's why critical thinking should be required, freshmen, sophomores, juniors, and seniors, and all 3 or 4 or 5 years of seminary. Required class and critical evaluation of what you're reading. And that takes the analysis not of theoretical logic, but of finding out what we're being told, either in class, by teachers, or books. Now, method is correct, and that's very important. Now, the work of John William Strutt, he became Lord Rayleigh. He received a Nobel in 1904 for working in atmospheric chemistry. But back here to 1892, he measured a liter of nitrogen resulting in the puzzle. What puzzle? And Ramsay, Sir William Ramsay, not the archaeologist, but Sir William Ramsay and Rayleigh, using uranite process, moved this along, and he discovered in this, they found bright yellow and orange light. So for the first time, you all right, Johnny?
I'm fine.
Okay. For the first time, they found this is a solution to the problem that there is no nitrogen or no helium on the Earth. See, because this is a helium, see, in this component part. But it took almost half a century, see, for them to give proof. And the end result of that is the sustaining of the universality of the methodology. See, but for half a century, men labored over just this one anomaly. You see that little chart? Receive view, anomalies. Well, can you account for that? Not can you account for most things, but can you account for everything you find? So this little item here, I then found here, found in spectral lines seen in light from solar observations circa 30 years before. Helium exists on Earth. That's the end result of that work of those men. And once again, universality of the scientific method is found to be a credible guide to studying the universe. Now, helium, now notice how absurd this is. If you have children, you've ever had a play or a party, you buy a tank of helium, see, to blow up the balloons. But when that was found, it was a fundamental watershed issue over the universality of the scientific enterprise. And now, I don't know what other things it's used for, Bill, others would know, but mainly for blowing up balloons. So, how important that is. Now, next week we'll give you a little shot about the chemistry. What else is there in the sun, and what does that have to do about a method of extrapolating heat, pressure, spectroscopy, the color formation in different atomic structures, and the discovery of deep time. Now, that's going to locate us in what we're going to start today. How much time do all the processes scientifically studied in astronomy and physics and geology and biology take? Okay? And it's over time. Now, just a slight bit of scolding. Only one of the 15 papers were in the library, and it was a mess. It has to be retyped again. And I would ask you not to take those papers out of the library. They didn't know where they were. Only one paper. And the staple had been ripped out of the corner, and the material has to be retyped again. So I encourage whoever, I'm sure it's not you, it's other students that have taken them out of the library, please pop those babies right back in, or I'll not be a happy puppy at all. But we start tonight this, and I want to lay the foundation. This field of geology, over and against astronomy and physics. Geology becomes, and then biology, the next area that we go to in a couple of times, biological revolutions, will shift us to anthropology. Will shift us to anthropology and social structures. And between now and a week or two from now, I want you to read as many times as you can the first 11 chapters of Genesis. Just, devotionally, I mean. And I want you to put down the things that are claimed there, phenomenologically, that entail some scientific perimeter. Like the origin of language, the origin of man, and just put down. Now, there's over 30, but I'm not playing games with you. Read the first 11 chapters of Genesis. See the origin of social structure, the origin of the home, the origin of sex. That's not a biological model. So put down the themes that are affirmed in the first 11 chapters of Genesis, and see the sciences that have developed primarily in the last 150 years to address them. Okay, to address them. So the three things tonight, we'll just mention some of the material in Genesis and up through chapter 3. Yes. See, there will progressively not be a place for these categories. There will progressively not be a place for the Imago Dei. Now when? 19th century. Long before the 20th century. Long before it. And these are fundamental, not merely over creation and the Creator. Now men will be talking in the context of these developments about nature and nature's God. Nature and nature's God. An enormous amount of talk and literature about that. Okay. So within the perimeter, a brief outline, and then we'll unpack some specific things regarding the development of geology, and for the first time over against any development in astronomy, any development. See, no one in the classical developments in astronomy ever claimed that the Bible was earth-centered. See, versus heliocentric. The Bible doesn't happen to say that. No one claimed that. But when we come into geology, and geology comes from physics, see, then we go into biology, we're going to start seeing intensification of the conflict between certain views of the Bible and the development of science. Over against whether the planets move in a circle or an ellipse. See, the Bible doesn't say that. The Bible doesn't discuss that. So that by itself wasn't a direct confrontation with dozens of passages of Scripture or the whole message of the gospel. See, the orbital patterns of the planets. It wasn't exactly a confrontation point. But we're going to get deeper and deeper into the very heart of the Bible. So tonight, because this is different from the other perimeters, but don't forget that the method developed in astronomy and physics and chemistry. Then that method was applied to geology. That method was applied to biology. Then the method was applied to the social sciences, to history, to linguistics, to the Bible, everything by 19th century. So if we can't catch hold of the philosophy of science involved, we will not get hold of anything that's not reducible to mindless fundamentalism. And by fundamentalism, we don't want to forget the culmination of this discussion was the modernist fundamentalist discussion in the West. The modernist fundamentalist discussion. The fundamentalists believe, now notice, it's over the nature of the Scriptures. The paradigm in the Christian world where the Scriptures were the inspired, authoritative, revealed, notice, Word of God. Well, how do we get to symbolism and metaphor today in discussions of myth and hermeneutics, etc.? And no particular class can address that. It takes the whole of education. It takes every perimeter of thought hammering away at that. Now, if the Bible is inspired, inspired Word of God, Catholics and Protestants believe that. That was a consensus. What is the message of Genesis that's going to be in such trouble? If it's authoritative, is it authoritative because it's the Word of God over against science? And that's that interfacing paper. See, it's not a research paper I'm asking you to do. I'm asking you to do a position paper. Well, maybe it's your position, but you're going to have to come up with one. You're going to have to address kids in school. You're going to have to address, not even wait for high school. You've got to start addressing at the 4th and 5th grade. 4th and 5th grade is where we have to address them, and not some later time. Now, if all the kids who can't understand that are in your church, you are already an anachronism, because most kids can understand it. Now, if it's revealed, now notice, this is over Revelation. Well, Revelation will fly in the face. Revelation and faith, all these biblical categories, will fly in the face of what? Of reason, science, method, math. Well, then faith will be over and against that. Faith is kind of just believing anything you want. Anything that's stupid, just believe it, because that's what you do when you have faith. That's an extreme position, but don't forget the real issue in this particular point is this. Now, the issues originally raised by the fathers of geology over against the original essays raised about astronomy and physics and chemistry. What does the Bible say? How can we account for the creation of the world? How can we account for the paleontological record? How can we account for the fossil record? See, how do you count that? Why, it's the flood. So by the time we get to the flood geology, see, the weight of a universal flood, you could figure this out in 7th grade science. The weight of water for a universal flood would throw the earth off its axis. Now, notice, I just said that because the response was, what was a miracle? Well, progressively, we're going to lose miracle and the supernatural as an explanatory system. You find that at the Tübingen School. So you surely don't have to have a class in the history of hermeneutics or New or Old Testament criticism to realize that those problems come from science. They didn't come from the disciplines that assimilate those viewpoints. Flood geology, what do you have to explain? What do you have to explain if you believe the Bible is the Word of God? Then the issue is exegesis and hermeneutics. I'll put that down. We can't discuss that here other than just bring it to your attention. How are we going to understand what the text of the Bible says? The text of the Bible. What's it say? And then the combat is between those who believe it literally and those who believe it symbolically. And anyone, see, this is where premillennial dispensationalism builds in the 19th century. We believe the Bible literally. And all the liberals are trying to get out from under what the Bible really says. See, it's over the nature of language, the nature of thought, the nature of revelation, nothing short of the ultimate foundations of the Christian faith. It is not a discussion about whether you care about the history of science. See, the East has already been set up by Hinduism and animism. See, Eastern metaphysics has always been open, Buddhism, to the mindset. How does the West get opened up to this? Gradually removing the universality principle and opting for the chaos principle, randomization principle. And nothing short of whether we ought to evangelize, not how many evangelism classes we have, but whether we ought to do that. See, we say we ought to because people are lost, but see, that's a paradigm. And that's what even most church members haven't the foggiest notion of why you're so worried about it. Okay? Now think, these are the matters, just very quickly. Charles Lyell, I'll just give you the fathers. This is not a class in the history of historical geology or plate tectonics, though we do have Bible believers that work on plate tectonics on the computer down at Los Alamos. And I will get papers there, but that's beyond our little evangelistic purpose in this class. But Charles Lyell, L-Y-E-L-L, was the father of what is called historically uniformitarianism. Lyell, L-Y-E-L-L, Charles, uniformitarianism. Let's put that in. That's simple. It might sound like freshman, see, but now uniformitarianism is the assumption that the causes at work in the present have always, I'm just shortening this, have always and will always, what? Be at work. Okay? Okay? Now that's the essence of it. Now if that's the case, you're already in trouble with a very fundamental claim of the first chapter of Genesis that the universe hasn't always existed. But you could, like Paul Tillich and Bultmann and Barth and theologians that are smarter than we are and have better educations than we are. Even people in our heritage do this, and that's because they've been to better schools. No, it's because they've been taught and they swallowed different things. Okay? Because you could learn bright things on the end of a log if the person on the other end of the log is bright enough to do that. Now, this is uniformitarianism. Now, we'll come back to that because we're now going to engage some Bible. See, I waited this time to say now about Bible. Now, George Cuvier. George, you do on your own. Cuvier. George Cuvier. Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't give you the 3-volume work of Lyell's Principles of Geology. Principles of Geology, 3 volumes, published in 1830. And a few dates, I just want you to keep your eyes on a few dates. See, I have hundreds of dates. I have timelines in all the sections of books I'm writing, but a few dates to see when's this going on. How does this relate to that? What's going on when? By whom? Who cares? See, and these just a few dates in this perimeter. So Lyell publishes what was at that time the authoritative book on the Principles of Geology, 3 volumes, in 1830. But James Hutton, when I get to Jimmy, James Hutton will be the first to propose uniformitarianism. But Lyell develops it as a scientific effort to develop a science of geology, which will be the application of the laws of physics to the crust of the earth at that time. Now then, Cuvier, 1769 to 1832. Now I gave you his dates. Do you see? We have the French Revolution, the American Revolution, Restoration Heritage, see, all red hot. Now Cuvier, the Frenchman, Catholic, is the father of catastrophism. Let me spell it, if there's some whose native tongue is not street English. C-A-T-A-S-T-R-O-P-H-I-S-M, catastrophism. Now, catastrophism was an effort by Cuvier to demonstrate scientifically that the science of geology and physics could account for rapid change on the Earth's surface. And the heart of catastrophism was the flood. But the heart of the debate was, does the Bible talk about a universal flood? People still talk about this, just like they realize what they're talking about. Whether it was a universal flood or a local flood. Well, if it's just a local flood, exegetically and evidentially, then it can't be used to explain the rapid change in the structure of the earth down in Texas or anyplace else. Now, the original work was Discourse Concerning Revolutions on the Surface of the Globe en Français, published in France in 1826. 1826. Now, Cuvier wrote about geology, trying to show that geology proved the Bible. See, now we've got to have some Bible work even in here. To prove that the Bible could be defended by science. Now that effort will be short-lived. But different concepts of geological change. There are 4 different concepts in Cuvier. I just want to mention those because he, not Lyell, was trying to support the Bible. Now the causes of some geological changes of the past, he said, differ in kind from those now in operation. Now why would he say that? Rapid change. You see, if the process of change on the Earth's surface is this, then you can't account for the rapid disappearance of life form, plant form, see, protozoa, fossils, human skeletal remains that they could decipher, see, from a 2-inch bone in Africa was the original human being. You can dismiss that scientifically and biblically. Jewel and I walked around the Leakey territory. He has a highly imaginative mind. But when you're wealthy, See, you can be more imaginative because work, you don't have to have a job. See? Now, so Cuvier, Bible, concerned about the Bible, that's all we're going to do with old Coup for a few minutes. Causes of geological changes change through the process. Now, you'd be hard put, see, to sustain a science of geology if every time you had a problem you said, oh, that's a miracle. You see, what Cuvier is going to say, the second, see, is every time there's something that doesn't fit the paradigm, it's a miracle. And scientists using miracle to explain why something didn't fit the paradigm is going to go bad for miracle. See, I don't mean that it goes bad for the biblical defensibility of miracle, but if every time you're in scientific difficulty, your explanation is miracle, that won't work out too well. Okay? So I want you to keep in mind what's at stake is our faith. It is not over a class or what tiny little assignments you have to have for class. It's over the faith. It's over whether any informed person can believe what I hope you and I believe. That's what it's about. And then it's about evangelism. Should we inflict that imbecilic belief system on anybody else? So we'll have to pick out the people who don't know anything about these things. Okay, freshmen, sophomores at the Bible college. Now, in the development of geology, paleontology begins to develop as a science, paleontology, that kind of thing. But the heart of the break of causal connection, I'm just going to put causality. Well, causality fits this universality principle here. See? Theories of cause. Maybe someone here is writing a paper on changing views of causality. With the collapse of a mechanical model as total or exhaustive explanation for the universe after Einstein. But that certainly doesn't give us chanceism or chaos principle. Though I understand what they're saying, I say it doesn't follow from anything they know. It follows from an assumption. Now the causes of the past differ in kind, now notice, in kind, from those now in operation, but are not more violent. See, we have fast change and slow change. Well, that's going to create a problem. It's like epicyclical explanation. Whoops, that don't fit, so we'll draw another circle. That doesn't fit, so we'll draw. So you don't have a science of geology. See, what's at stake is the science of geology versus what Protestants and Catholics claim the Bible said. Now, Lucien and Caillot, these are Frenchmen because the science of geology has its best hours, see, in France and in England. In France and in England. Now, just as a matter of fact. Now, the causes of geological change of the past differs not in kind, this is a position, but in energy. Energy. Well, we have to build up a theory of energy, see, of causality. And two men who worked along that line are Robert Hooke, with an E, Robert Hooke. Now, I'm going to give you his dates only to show you how far back he was worried about this problem. 1668 to 1688. See, he is in the annals of the history of science, and he died when he was 20 years old. Okay? So if you wait till you're 40 or 50 years old, probably the genius category has bypassed you. And Robert Ray, John Ray, not Johnny Ray, the whaler that just passed away, but he died in 1692. Do not have a birth date for John Ray, but these were Christians trying to sustain the Bible in the development of universal causality. Newton, you hear the universal causality? Now, does Newton's universal causality obtain for geology? If Newtonian universal causality does not obtain for geology, and Newtonian model of science holds the day, then geology can't be a science. It's just very simple. Now the problem then is the constancy in kind and energy of geological changes. The constancy in kind and the amount of energy involved. Amount of energy to produce a ton of coal or a diamond. See, we get silt formation if you've done do geology and you've done historical geology. How much pressure does it take to create a diamond? How much pressure does it take to create coal or to create petroleum? See, all these things flow out of geology and explanation. Now, the general deluge or the flood becomes the center of the discussion between Lyell and Cuvier's schools. Lyell and Cuvier, I'll take those up a little more in just a little bit. Now, in geological forces of the past differ neither in kind nor in energy from those now in operation. Hutton and Lyell, Robert Hutton, Hutton, and Charles Lyell, in the theory of the earth. Theory of the earth. Now, that's prior to Lyell's Principles of Geology, but these were major textbooks. That's what we have to look at to see the development of these sciences. Not what secondary sources say was the development, but these become the books used at university to study these disciplines. So Hutton and Lyell's theory of the earth, between 1726 and 1797, the first consistent and general doctrine of uniformity in geology was presented, the theory of the earth. Now that's 18th century. You hear this? Now the theory of causality in the theory of the earth, written by Hutton and Lyell, was based on the assumption of Newtonian physics. Newtonian physics. In fact, the first economic theory was based on the presupposition of Newtonian physics about supply and demand. See, the Smith, this was an application of Newtonian physics to economics. Now, another factor to keep in mind is paleontological discoveries limited to the surface of the earth when the science was young. Paleontological discoveries were limited to the surface of the earth. 3, all islands and volcanic origins of all mountains and all sediments became a fundamental theme. The origins of mountains, sedimentation, different types of earth, ground, chemical analysis, and the formation of rocks. Those 4 themes were discussed in the theory of the earth. That is, the source of power, the paleontological record, which was only a surface analysis, the origin of all islands and volcanic phenomena, and the formation of rocks, different kinds of rock. Now the problem that raised is as long ago as the 18th century. Describing process which no one had ever seen performed. Empiricism is the only reason I mentioned that. How scientific is geological explanation? Well, without the method, seeing the method being built up, the method's been sustained in the physical parameter. Without seeing the scientific method being successful, there's no resolution of how you extrapolate about the past. You have to have a theory of extrapolation, and physics and astronomy will develop the philosophy of science through which the science of geology will address the matter. So geology couldn't have existed without the preceding, less than that, but 150 years of history of the development of successful scientific operation. Now Hutton, the result therefore of our present inquiry, he says, is that we find no vestige of a beginning and no prospects for an end. See, vestigial remains in paleontology. And the implications, Hutton said, it is in vain to look for anything higher in the origin of the earth. Now, Hutton and Lyell will be the source, in the name of geology, source in a scientific denial of creation. See, but geology shouldn't have addressed that subject. That is not a geological matter. But it doesn't make any difference. Lyell and Hutton did address it. And said we cannot expect supernatural intervention as the religious speak of. Well, the origin of this development will be deism in England, atheism in France. Now notice the history of apologetics and things of that nature, the so-called five proofs. Well, they're using a Christian form of Aristotle's five ways. But Aristotle's five ways were not proof for God's existence, but proof of why the universe is rational. By the time Christians, Aquinas and people of that nature, Protestants and Catholics, flipped the design of those arguments, they became proof for God's existence. After science develops and critiques the proofs, they're no longer proof, but they were in their original form. The design of an argument has to be evaluated before you can evaluate its power. What is an argument designed to do? What's it for? Just to argue, or what could it do if it were well designed? So in this development, we will see the assimilation of a complete mechanical model in astronomy, in physics, in chemistry, in geology, and then this will fly in the face because if biological evolution is the case, now notice, I want you to see a powerful tension in philosophy of science. If evolution's the case, what? Evolution will call in question what? Well, that's not false. Well, no, it's the little dab that we put up. Well, the issue of geology. There'll be a confrontation between the developments in geology and the developments in biology. Because if the laws of physics have always obtained,